A packed courtroom in Chicago, Illinois. The courtroom scene turns into a battle of courage against hatred as a black boy refuses to be silenced by a racist officer's cruel words, and the judge's shocking decision will change everything. The courtroom is packed, the air thick with murmurs and tension. Rows of spectators sit shoulder to shoulder, their eyes darting between the judge and the boy standing alone at the defendant's table. The fluorescent lights cast a cold, sterile glow over everything, making the scene feel even more suffocating. Malik, a 13-year-old homeless black boy, stands on trial for a minor offense, accused of stealing food from a local grocery store. His stomach twists with hunger, his body weak from days of barely eating. He clutches the sleeves of his oversized hoodie, the fabric worn thin and offering little warmth against the courtroom's biting air. His sneakers are untied, one sole nearly coming apart, but his gaze remains steady despite the weight pressing down on him. Across from him stands Officer Karen Whitman, a tall, imposing white police officer, with a reputation for being overly aggressive toward black youth. Her uniform is crisp, her badge gleaming under the harsh lights. She narrows her eyes at Malik, arms crossed over her chest, radiating authority and disdain. Her presence alone makes it clear. She expects to win this case with ease. The judge clears his throat, flipping through a stack of papers before addressing the courtroom. We will now hear testimony from Officer Whitman regarding the incident in question. Officer, please proceed. Whitman steps forward, her voice sharp and unwavering. On the evening of October 12th, I observed the defendant exiting a grocery store, concealing food in his hoodie. When I approached him, he attempted to flee. Given the circumstances, I was forced to detain him and recover the stolen goods. Malik grits his teeth but remains silent. He knows how this works. If he speaks out of turn, if he so much as flinches, they will use it against him. The judge nods. And what was the value of the stolen items? Less than $20, Your Honor, the prosecutor replies, barely glancing up from his notes. The room grows quieter. $20. The weight of that number lingers in the air, a cruel reminder of how little it takes to put someone like Malik in this position. He had been starving. He had no money, no home, no family to rely on. But none of that matters now. The only thing the court sees is a crime. Malik takes a deep breath. He knows this is his moment. If he stays silent, they will decide his fate without him. He forces himself to step forward, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. I didn't want to steal, he says. I hadn't eaten in days. I was just trying to survive. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Some shift uncomfortably. Others remain expressionless. But Whitman scoffs, shaking her head. Spare us the sob story, kid. Everyone has a choice. You made yours. Malik's hands tighten into fists. He expected this. He knew she would try to strip him of his humanity, reducing him to nothing more than a criminal in the eyes of the court, but he refuses to back down. If you had to choose between starving and taking a meal, what would you do? He asks, his voice unwavering. The judge's gaze lingers on him for a moment longer than expected. The murmurs in the courtroom grow louder. Whitman's jaw tightens, but before she can respond, the judge raises a hand for silence. What starts as a simple hearing quickly spirals into an explosive moment that will leave the entire courtroom in shock. Have you ever witnessed or experienced injustice? Share your story in the comments. The trial begins. The air in the courtroom is thick with tension, the weight of Malik's fate pressing against the walls. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, wastes no time painting Malik as a delinquent. His words cut through the silence like a knife, each sentence designed to strip Malik of any sympathy. Your Honor, this is not about hunger or desperation. This boy is a street kid, a troublemaker who refuses to follow the law. If we excuse this behavior, what kind of message does that send? His voice is cold, calculated. He knew exactly what he was doing when he stole. People like him always do. Malik, standing in his worn-out shoes, listens as his character is torn apart by someone who has never met him. He clenches his fists at his sides, his heart beat loud in his ears. He wants to explain. He wants them to understand. When the judge finally gestures for him to speak, he forces himself to meet the prosecutor's gaze. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," Malik says, his voice steady despite the fear tightening his chest. "I was starving. I hadn't eaten in days. I just needed something, anything to keep me going." The words hang in the air, raw and unfiltered. A few murmurs ripple through the courtroom, but before Malik can continue, a loud bang shatters the moment. Officer Karen Whitman slams her hand down on the stand, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Shut your mouth and stay silent. This court's not for slaves," she barks, pointing directly at Malik. The courtroom gasps. A moment of pure, stunned silence fills the air. Even the judge looks momentarily frozen, his gavel hovering above the desk. The tension in the room snaps like a frayed wire, sending shockwaves through the crowd. A few spectators exchange horrified glances, while others remain still, as if unable to process what they just heard. Malik's hands ball into fists, his nails digging into his palms, but his face remains composed. He refuses to let her words break him. He refuses to give her the reaction she wants. He has been insulted before, dismissed before, but never like this. Never in front of a room full of people who were supposed to stand for justice. The judge's gavel pounds against the desk, the sharp sound commanding order. "Enough!" His voice is loud, firm, but the damage has been done. The entire tone of the trial has shifted, spiraling into something much bigger than a simple theft case. This is no longer about stolen food. This is about something far deeper, something people can no longer ignore. The courtroom remains tense, the weight of Whitman's words hanging like a dark cloud. Malik stands tall, refusing to shrink under the scrutiny. He doesn't know what will happen next, but one thing is clear. This trial has become more than just about him. It has become a moment of reckoning. How would you react if you heard someone say this in court? Instead of shrinking back, Malik takes a deep breath and speaks. "I may be homeless, but I'm not a slave. You don't get to talk to me like that." The courtroom erupts with murmurs. Even those who doubted Malik are now questioning Officer Whitman's behavior. The tension is electric, the energy shifting as the weight of Malik's words sinks in. He stands tall, his voice unwavering, refusing to let the moment pass in silence. For the first time since the trial began, he is not just a defendant, he is a force that cannot be ignored. The judge leans forward, his eyes narrowing. "Officer Whitman, control yourself." But the officer, fuming with rage, doubles down. She refuses to be challenged, especially by a boy she sees as beneath her. Her face twists in anger, her hands gripping the edge of the witness stand so tightly that her knuckles turn white. Her voice is sharp, laced with venom. "These kids think they can do whatever they want. Back in the day, we knew how to keep them in line." The reaction is immediate. Gasps ripple through the courtroom. Journalists seated in the gallery scribble furiously in their notepads, their pens scratching against paper as they capture every word. A few reporters tap hurriedly on their phones, already drafting headlines that will soon spread across the internet. Every journalist in the room is watching closely. This story is about to go viral. The judge's gavel slams down once, twice, demanding order. His expression is unreadable, but his tone is firm. "Officer Whitman, I will not tolerate this kind of language in my courtroom." Whitman's mouth opens as if to argue, but the moment has already slipped from her grasp. The tide has turned, and she knows it. People are no longer focused on Malik's so-called crime. They are looking at her, at the raw, ugly truth she has just exposed about herself. Malik remains still, his heart pounding in his chest, but his face remains composed. He does not smile, does not celebrate the shift in attention. This is not about victory. This is about justice, about standing firm in the face of hate and refusing to be silenced. The entire courtroom feels different now. The power dynamics have shifted. The trial is no longer about Malik stealing food. It is about something much larger. It is about a system that allows people like Whitman to wield power unchecked. Every journalist in the room scribbles furiously. This story is about to go viral. Have you ever seen someone stand up to racism? How did it end? Share your thoughts. Malik doesn't back down. He looks the judge straight in the eye and says, "If stealing food to survive makes me a criminal, then what does calling me a slave make her?" His voice is strong, unwavering, and cuts through the thick tension in the room like a blade. The weight of his words sinks into every corner of the courtroom, forcing everyone present to confront the truth in front of them. The murmurs grow louder, some filled with agreement, others heavy with discomfort. People who had come into the courtroom indifferent are now leaning forward, watching intently, sensing the shift in power. The judge's expression shifts from neutrality to realization. His lips press together, his fingers tapping against the desk as he processes Malik's words. For a moment, it seems like the entire room holds its breath. Some people nod in agreement. Others shift uncomfortably in their seats, their gazes darting between Malik and Officer Whitman, as if realizing for the first time what has been unfolding before them. The atmosphere has changed. What started as a simple theft trial has become something far more significant. Officer Whitman scoffs, rolling her eyes in a dramatic display of contempt. "Don't listen to him. He's just another street thug." Her voice is sharp, dripping with condescension. But this time, the reaction is not what she expects. Instead of agreement, there is hesitation. Instead of silent approval, there is tension. People are no longer so sure of her, no longer so quick to take her side without question. But before she can continue, the judge slams his gavel, the sharp crack echoing through the room like a gunshot. "Officer Whitman, you are out of line." His voice is firm, unwavering, carrying a weight that cannot be ignored. A stunned silence follows, thick with disbelief. It is the first time someone in power has directly called out Whitman's behavior, the first time she has been forced to confront the consequences of her own words. Journalists stop writing mid-sentence. Spectators sit up straighter, as if sensing that this trial is no longer just about a boy accused of stealing. It has become a defining moment of justice. Whitman's face hardens, but she does not speak. For the first time, she seems to understand that she has lost control of the narrative. The trial is slipping away from her grasp, and her authority is no longer unquestioned. Her badge, once a symbol of her power, suddenly feels like an empty shield. The realization dawns on her that this time, she has gone too far. Malik's hands remain at his sides, steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. He knows he has just taken a step that cannot be undone. He has forced the courtroom to see what was always there, the truth. His pulse pounds in his ears, but he keeps his shoulders straight. He will not be made small. He will not let them dismiss him again. The judge's gaze lingers on Malik before he exhales deeply. He turns back to the prosecutor, who now looks equally unsettled. "We are no longer just discussing a petty theft case. Officer Whitman's conduct has raised serious concerns, and I will be addressing them formally." His voice is calm, but carries a finality that sends another wave of murmurs through the courtroom. Gasps ripple through the room. The air is thick with anticipation, with the realization that something far bigger than a single trial is unfolding. Some in the audience nod, their expressions resolute. Others look away, uncomfortable with the shift in focus. The cameras from the press zoom in, recording every moment, capturing history as it happens. The weight of justice hangs in the balance, teetering between accountability and the systems that have long protected people like Whitman. Whitman crosses her arms, her expression unreadable. But the damage is done, the truth has been spoken, and no amount of dismissal can erase it. She shifts her weight from foot to foot, jaw clenched, as she watches the courtroom slowly turn against her. This is not how she expected the trial to go. She had been so certain, so assured that her authority would go unchallenged. But now, standing in the harsh light of scrutiny, she realizes she was wrong. The judge slams his gavel. "Officer Whitman, you are out of line. Do you think people like Officer Whitman should be held accountable?" The judge does something no one expected. "Officer Whitman, leave this courtroom immediately." His voice is sharp, commanding, leaving no room for argument. The room is silent, every eye fixed on the officer, waiting for her reaction. Every spectator, journalist, and legal professional in attendance knows they are witnessing a moment that will be talked about for years. The power in the judge's words lingers in the air, heavy with finality. Whitman's face turns red, her jaw tightening as if she wants to fight back. She stammers, looking around as if hoping for someone to defend her, but the bailiffs are already moving toward her. There is no escape from what she has done. The authority she once held is slipping through her fingers like sand, and for the first time, she feels powerless. Her hands clench into fists at her sides, but there is nothing left to say. She has crossed a line that cannot be undone. She storms out, her boots clicking against the floor, her entire demeanor still defiant. But there is no applause, no victory in her exit, just the quiet weight of justice settling into the room. The courtroom watches in silence, some still stunned by the turn of events. Others exchange glances, realizing they have just witnessed a moment that will be remembered for years to come. The energy in the room shifts, the balance of power tipping in a way no one had anticipated. For the first time in his life, Malik sees power used to defend him, not harm him. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, but the feeling in his chest is something new, something unfamiliar. It is not just relief. It is the realization that for once the system has chosen to see him, to acknowledge his humanity instead of stripping it away. He has spent his life watching people like Whitman wield power unchecked. But today, that power has been taken from her. It is a moment he will never forget. The judge then turns to Malik, his expression softer but still firm. "You don't belong in a jail cell. You belong in school, in a home, not on the streets." His voice is resolute, final, leaving no room for debate. He looks at Malik not with pity but with understanding. The courtroom is still, waiting for what will come next. This case was never truly about stolen food. It was about justice, fairness, and a system that had failed a boy who was only trying to survive. The murmurs begin again, whispers spreading as people process what is happening. This is not just about a petty theft charge anymore. It is about something larger, something systemic that has been ignored for too long. A shift has occurred, and no one in this room will leave unchanged. The judge's ruling is not just about Malik. It is about setting a precedent, about standing against the forces that have allowed this kind of injustice to go unchallenged for too long. The judge dismisses all charges and orders the city to provide Malik with housing assistance. The words echo in the stillness of the room. A decision has been made, one that defies the expectations of those who thought this trial would end in another conviction. The weight of the moment settles over everyone, pressing into their chests as they take in what has just happened. The gavel falls one last time, sealing Malik's fate, not as a criminal, but as a boy who deserves a chance at life. Malik exhales, his shoulders finally relaxing. He has fought, and for once he has been heard. The world is still unfair, still unkind, but in this moment, justice has found its way through the cracks. He looks at the judge, the journalists, the people who have watched him fight for his dignity, and he knows that while this battle is won, the fight for justice is far from over. Do you think more judges should take a stand against injustice? Drop your thoughts below. The courtroom video goes viral. Within hours, social media explodes with outrage and support for Malik. The footage of Officer Whitman's racist outburst spreads like wildfire, drawing millions of views. People from all walks of life share their opinions, flooding comment sections with messages of solidarity and calls for justice. Some express shock, others anger, but all agree on one thing. What happened in that courtroom should never have happened at all. Protesters take to the streets, demanding an investigation into Officer Whitman's conduct. Crowds gather outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Justice for Malik" and "End racial profiling now." Activists, local leaders, and community members rally behind him, determined to ensure that no child ever faces what he endured. The city, once indifferent to cases like his, is now forced to confront its own deep-seated issues. The people will not be silenced. Malik's story makes national news. Major media outlets cover the trial, dissecting every moment, every word exchanged in that courtroom. His name trends worldwide, and the country watches closely as the case continues to unfold. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people rally behind him, using their platforms to amplify his voice. Talk shows discuss the systemic failures that led to his arrest, while news anchors question how many other Maliks exist. How many children are suffering in silence, unheard and unseen. A well-known civil rights lawyer steps forward to represent Malik. They announce a lawsuit against the police department for racial profiling, stating that Malik's case is not an isolated incident, but part of a larger, more dangerous pattern. This is about more than just one officer's actions, the lawyer declares at a press conference. This is about accountability. This is about justice. And we will not stop fighting until both are served. Meanwhile, Officer Whitman is placed on unpaid leave pending an investigation. The department releases a statement, distancing itself from her actions, but the public is not satisfied. People demand more. They want policies changed, officers held accountable, and justice for every child who has ever been unfairly targeted. The pressure mounts, and soon officials have no choice but to act. Malik, though overwhelmed, watches it all unfold with a mixture of disbelief and hope. He never expected his fight for dignity to reach this level, never imagined that so many people would stand by his side. For the first time in his life, he is not just surviving, he is being seen, heard, and defended. Do you think viral moments like this help create real change? Let's debate. Weeks later, Malik walks into a brand new apartment. The moment he steps inside, he feels a sense of disbelief. The space is small but clean, the walls freshly painted, the scent of new furniture lingering in the air. A local community organization had stepped in, ensuring that Malik had a stable home and a fresh start. For the first time in his life, he has a door to close behind him, a place where he is safe. The judge's words stay with him. You belong in school, not on the streets. Those words had changed everything. They had set in motion events that led him here, to this apartment, to this second chance. He walks through the space, taking it all in. The living room, the tiny kitchen, the single bedroom, all his. No more sleeping in shelters, no more wondering where he will be tomorrow. He finally has stability. For the first time, Malik has a bed. A real bed, not a thin mattress on a shelter floor or a cold bench in a public park. He runs his fingers over the soft blanket, sitting down carefully as if testing to see if this is all real. Against the wall there is a small desk. something he has never had before. A place where he can do homework, read, or just sit and think. These may seem like simple things to others, but to Malik, they are everything. Through the help of the same community organization, Malik is enrolled in school. His first day is approaching, and for once he looks forward to it. He no longer has to fight just to survive. He can focus on learning, on building a future. The weight of uncertainty that has followed him for years finally begins to lift. The city that once treated him as invisible now sees him. Not as a criminal, not as a lost cause, but as a boy with potential. As he sits by his window, looking out at the city skyline, he knows his fight isn't over. The world has not magically changed overnight. There are still other kids like him, still others facing injustice, still others who need help. He has been given a second chance, but he knows many never get one. He makes a silent promise to himself. He will not waste this opportunity. He will not forget where he came from. He will find a way to give back, to be the voice for those who are still unheard. They called me a slave, but today I walk free. What's the biggest lesson from Malik's story? Let's talk in the comments.